Hi, this is Professor Earth. Now, that's not my real name. I'm using a pseudonym. I'm a retired scientist, and because I'm retired, I can tell you the truth. People who are working now in the system, they have constraints on them. They have to get research dollars to promote their careers. And that means they can't offend anyone at their university. They can't offend anyone in the universe of people who might see their proposals and review them. They can't offend the government officials who hand out the research grants to them. I don't have that problem. I can tell you the truth. And I'm going to tell you it's a lot worse than what you're hearing. I'm going to tell you about ecosystem collapse in the Boreal Forest of North America. Let's just review what the Boreal Forest is very quickly. It's a belt of trees at high latitudes that goes all the way around the world. It goes through Canada and Alaska, and also through Siberia, through European Russia, and into the Scandinavian countries. It's a huge area. It's the Earth's largest single biome. It covers about 14% of the Earth's surface, and it includes about 1/3 of all the forests in the world. Some people think that forests are very ancient, but the Boreal Forest is actually really new in terms of geologic time. It only formed 15,000 years ago when the Ice Age ended. Before that, we had another biome called the steppe tundra, or the mammoth tundra. It was sort of an Arctic grassland. And of course, there were glaciers over much of the northern hemisphere as well. The fact that the steppe tundra ecosystem totally collapsed due to climate change at the end of the last ice age raises questions about the Boreal Forest ecosystem. Is it also going to collapse in response to our current climate change? Well, the simplest scenario would be that as climate warms, that the Boreal Forest would just migrate a little bit northward to get away from the warm temperatures, move up where it's cooler. And some scientists hold this idea. For instance, in a recent paper by Ronnie Rothbarth and his colleagues that came out in an online site called The Conversation, they suggested that the world's boreal forests are moving northward as climate change pushes them, and maybe they're just shrinking slightly because of the effects of climate change. One big problem with the idea that climate change is pushing the boreal forest northward is if you go to the northern edge, you don't find a lot of evidence that we're colonizing or pushing trees north from their current limit. There's a few scattered trees you find, or a few areas, maybe as much as 25 kilometers north of the current limit. But for the most part, this just isn't happening. May happen in the future, but we don't see it now. Another big problem is that modern experimental studies done by people like Dr. Peter Reich and his colleagues and published in 2022 in the journal Nature show that even modest temperature increases and associated dryness and other effects have a very bad effect on trees that live in the boreal forest. Either their growth is severely stunted or they just die. And when these trees die, then you don't have a boreal forest, you have an ecosystem collapse. But we know that Dr. Peter Reich is correct when he says that global warming will affect trees in a bad way in the boreal forest, because we can just go to the boreal forest, and what we see is that millions and tens of millions of trees are dying right now. They're being killed by the heat of global warming, killed by insect infestations, and killed by huge forest fires that are sweeping through the whole area. It's so bad that it's very clear that the whole boreal forest ecosystem is collapsing right now. The trees are all dying. And you can't have a boreal forest ecosystem if you don't have trees. If you don't have a boreal forest, there's no boreal forest ecosystem. It's clearly collapsing. Now it's time to look at the actual evidence of the ecosystem collapse. Rothbarth and his colleagues in 2023 published this very interesting graphic showing the compilation of 20 years of satellite data, and it shows areas where the boreal forest has gone brown, the trees are dying, they're under heat stress from global warming, and places where they remain green, it's still healthy. And for some reason they say this is pushing the boreal forest northward. It's not what it shows. Some of the greenest areas, for instance in far southwest Alaska, are at the lower end, the southern end of the boreal forest. The same thing is true over in the far eastern side in Quebec. Whereas other places, the dark brown areas are moving all the way through the boreal forest in Alaska, all the way through the central part of the boreal forest on the western side of Hudson's Bay. So this shows not a northward migration, but kind of a patchwork of areas where the boreal forest is dying and a patchwork of places where it's still surviving. As global warming impacts it, it's breaking apart, i.e. it's collapsing. Okay, that satellite imagery is fascinating, but we need to ground truth it. So just for reference, here's what a healthy part of the boreal forest looks like. We're in Denali National Park. The trees are all alive, they're green, they're healthy. But go just a few miles south, and we find areas where essentially all the trees are dead due to heat stress and also due to insect attack, which reflects the ongoing global warming heat stress. We can go 10 miles away, and we see more dead trees. We can go 50 miles away. We can actually go hundreds of miles away. And I've traced this. We have this same kind of tree kill all through south central Alaska. So we get the drone out, we get away from the road, we look at these trees as far as we can see. And yes, there are a few patches where the trees aren't dead yet, but for the most part, almost all of the trees are dying in the southern part of the boreal forest, all through central Alaska. And without trees, you can't have a boreal forest ecosystem. The extent of tree kill that we see with our drone overflights is just amazing. And this is due to heat stress, also due to insect infestation, and it's killing virtually all the trees over huge areas of the boreal forest. But there's another effect that's equally large, and that is forest fires. And this is also driven by global warming. We're also in areas where the trees are stressed, so they burn more easily. In this case, I've taken the drone up the Chattanooga River to near the headwaters of this river, so we're near the northern end of the boreal forest. And in this area, we see just huge amounts of land where fires have gone through, fire after fire, and the trees aren't revegetating well. So we have huge patches of open brown land, and this is being seen from outer space in the imaging. So this is a major problem for the boreal forest. How much of the boreal forest is being destroyed by forest fires? Well, that's pretty well documented. Here's an image that shows forest fires across the boreal forest over a 20-year period. Now let's look at a map created just a short while ago by Canadian Geographic. And all of the fires here in this last year, 2023, are shown in white. And they're as large as all the fires produced during that 20-year period that I just showed you. And look at all the fires in white and yellows. These are the fires in just the last 10 or 20 years. So the rate of fire is increasing, and the amount of territory that it's destroying is enormous. And together with just trees dying on their own, this is what is segmenting and fragmenting the boreal forest into smaller and smaller areas. If we look closely at these bare earth areas where the forest fires are ripped through, we can still see the remains of the forests that were there. There's silvered trees, charred and burned, just standing up. In other areas, all the trees are gone. The fires were so intense and so long ago that essentially it's burned down to the grass, burned down to the soil, and removed the soil itself. And some of these areas are absolutely enormous. Here I'm going to scan the drone camera around and look at an entire landscape from the Chattanooga River to the mountaintops, which has been affected by a series of fires over the last 10 to 20 years. And the forest fires now are so hot that they're not only destroying and burning the forest, but they're burning the soil and the peat that was on the ground beneath the forest. And this makes it very difficult for new forests to come back. So the boreal forest is collapsing right now, and it's one of Earth's major climate tipping points. So this means that global warming will probably accelerate in the future. But it does not mean that the boreal forest itself will entirely disappear. If we go back to the satellite map and we look at areas where there's still healthy boreal forest as shown by the green colors, these are areas where it may survive in small patches, and we would call these refugia in paleoecology. Now, the current areas where it's green may get smaller as climate continues to warm, but it's likely that little bits of the boreal forest will still survive, even though the entire boreal forest ecosystem, as a globe-girdling belt, is going to disappear.